Are you struggling to manage your finances because your paychecks are unpredictable? Do you find it hard to plan for the future when you don't know what your income will be next month? Well, today we're going to tackle this challenge head on. I'm going to share 7 practical and useful tips to help you budget effectively even when your income fluctuates. And here's my promise. By the end of this episode, you're going to feel empowered to take control of your finances and find peace of mind. So let's get started.
In a world where crushing debt keeps you trapped, where living paycheck to paycheck has become your new normal, and where the dream of retirement seems impossibly out of reach, there's hope. Join financial evangelist Ralph E. Stepp Jr., a man who's walked through the fire of financial failure and emerged stronger on the other side. Welcome to Ask Ralph, the show where real-world experience meets biblical truth to break the bondage of financial despair. Get ready to take control of your money, break free from the financial stress, and align your resources with God's purpose for your life. This is Ask Ralph with Ralph E. Stepp Jr.
Well, thank you for joining me today on the Ask Ralph Show. I'm your financial evangelist, and I'm thrilled you're here. I know you're taking valuable time out of your day to be with me, and I promise I'm going to make an impact on you with today's topic. My goal here is all about helping you escape that cycle of financial shame and do it with confidence. So today we're discussing a crucial topic, and that's how can you budget when paychecks are unpredictable? Many of you are dealing with fluctuating incomes, which can cause stress and uncertainty. Whether you're in seasonal employment, if you're self-employed, or part of the gig economy, managing your finances can feel like a navigation of a storm. But I'm here to tell you that there's hope. And here's the hope. By the end of this episode, you're going to have practical tips to manage your money effectively, align your spending with your values, and find financial peace. So stay engaged because I'll be sharing some key takeaways that will make a real difference in your life. Now, yesterday we talked about whether cheap advice is really worth the price. The key takeaway was understanding the value of quality financial advice and how it can save you money and stress in the long run. So if you missed it, you can catch up at AskRalph.com. That's where we keep all of our episodes. And today's topic comes from a listener named Craig, and Craig writes this: Ralph, I'm at my wit's end. I'm struggling to budget because my income is so unpredictable. Some months I make enough to cover all my bills, but other months I fall short. This inconsistency is causing me a lot of stress. I feel like I'm constantly walking on a financial tightrope, never knowing if I'll make it to the other side. Every time I think I have a handle on my finances, another unexpected expense or a lean month throws me off balance. It's like trying to build a house on quicksand. Just when you think you've laid a solid foundation, it all starts sinking again. The uncertainty is weighing heavily on me. I find myself lying awake at night, worrying about how I'll pay the next bill or what will happen if an emergency comes up. It's affecting my health. It's affecting my relationships and my peace of mind. I feel like I'm drowning in uncertainty and I need some guidance. I've tried tracking my expenses, but it feels like a never-ending battle. I've cut back on non-essentials, but it's hard to plan for the future when I don't know what my income will be next month. I feel like I'm stuck in a cycle of financial stress and I don't know how to break free. Ralph, please, I need your help. How can I create a budget that works for me despite the fluctuations in my income? I'm desperate for some stability and a way to manage my finances without this constant fear and anxiety. Any advice you can give would be greatly appreciated. Well, Craig, what a great question, and thank you so much for your question. And I know how challenging it can be to budget with unpredictable income. The uncertainty can cause a lot of stress. It can cause a lot of anxiety, and it makes it hard to plan for the future. I've worked with many clients in similar situations, and I've seen firsthand how difficult it can be. But I want to start by letting you know that there is hope. And today, I'm going to provide you with some concrete action steps to help you manage your finances effectively, even when your income fluctuates. And just remember this, you're not alone in this, and together we're going to find a solution that works for you. Remember, if you've got a question you'd like answered, just like Craig, you can go to justaskralph.com because here's the truth. I love answering your questions, and it's the central part of the show. It's my goal to help you find the answers that you need. Well, let's get started by taking a look at the word for today's Bible verse. And today's verse comes from the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 19, and it says this: And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. What a beautiful verse. What a great way to remember that the Lord is going to provide for every one of our needs. And this verse ultimately reminds us that God is our provider. He knows our needs. Listen, He knows our needs before we know our needs, and He will supply them according to His riches, and He has those riches. And this verse gives us confidence. Craig, I hope you hear that. It gives us peace, knowing that even in times of uncertainty, and Craig, I feel that you've got that uncertainty. So even in times of uncertainty, God is in control. And I am truly grateful for the opportunity to help people just like you, Craig. I've seen how financial uncertainty can weigh heavily on people. And I'm thankful that the Lord has given me the experiences, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and understanding to help others navigate these challenges from a place of faith, because that is really the key. And it is a privilege to be able to share this knowledge and provide hope and practical solutions. So let's get right to it, and let's get into the details of today's show. Craig, let me start by sharing a personal story. Many years ago, I worked with a client. We'll call her Fiona. Now, Fiona was a freelance graphic designer, and her income definitely fluctuated from month to month. Some months she would have plenty of work and make a good income, but other months were lean and she struggled to make ends meet. Fiona was constantly stressed about her finances, and it was affecting her health. It was affecting her relationships. So one day, Fiona broke down. She came to me for a consultation, and she was truly desperate for help. She felt like she was drowning in uncertainty, and she just didn't know how to manage her money effectively. And this was really challenging for her with her fluctuating income. So what do? We started by tracking all of her income and expenses meticulously. And when we did that, Fiona was surprised to see how much she was spending on non-essentials during those good months, the months when she had the money flowing in, which left her short during those lean months. And listen, I don't know about you, Craig, but this is easy to do. I've experienced this myself, this urge to when you have a really good month to go out and spend. So it's not all too uncommon. So the next thing we did was we created a budget based on her lowest income month. And listen, I'm going to talk about all of these steps today. I just wanted to kind of share this story with you because it was really a way to encapsulate what we were able to do. So the first thing we did, we created a budget. We looked at her lowest income month first. That way we ensured that her essential expenses were always going to be covered. Now, call this the baseline budget plan, something that would meet at least her basic needs. And then what we did was any extra income she received during those, quote, better months or those fat months was allocated to savings. We allocated that to debt reduction, and we gave her some ability to do some discretionary spending because, listen, she was the one making the money. She was out there slaying the dragons. She was making it happen, but we needed to figure out a way that she could handle those lean months. At the same time, Fiona set up an emergency fund. And this is one of the big things that we're going to talk about today. She set up that emergency fund to provide a financial buffer. And that financial buffer is going to be essential when you have those months where the income dips. The next thing we did was we prioritized her essential expenses. Those were her giving and savings. And then we really looked at a debt plan to help her manage her debt wisely. And in the end, Fiona's transformation was remarkable. I loved watching this. I love watching when my clients and people that I work with have that aha moment and they really start to click. And when Fiona, it was, like I said, it was remarkable. She no longer felt like she was drowning in uncertainty. Fiona had a clear plan and she was able to manage her finances effectively, even with those fluctuations in her income. And the beautiful part of this, Fiona's stress levels decreased and she was able to focus on her work. And she was a very creative person and she was able to focus on her relationships with others. And that's the beauty of having all of these things in order without the constant worry about money. So Craig, you might be saying, okay, that sounds good for Fiona, but what about me? Well, Craig, you too can overcome this situation. So today I'm going to share 7 practical and useful tips to help you budget effectively even with an unpredictable income. So let's jump right into it. Tip 1. Lay your foundation on faith. Seek God's wisdom and guidance. I always like to start here. Before implementing any financial strategy, it's vital to turn to God in prayer, ask for discernment, and ask for direction in managing the resources He's entrusted to you. That's where we need to start. This act of seeking divine guidance establishes a firm foundation for financial decision-making, rooting it in faith. And I think that's the key. That's what I talk about on the show every day. Rooting it in faith rather than solely on human understanding. I've said many times on the show that I can teach you to be a very wealthy scoundrel, but it's not going to be long-term. It's not going to give you that character. Because here's the truth. Christian financial stewardship is deeply intertwined with biblical principles that offer timeless wisdom for handling money. I'm going to talk about a couple of those right now. Trusting in God's provision, as we highlighted in Philippians 4:19, Proverbs 3:9 and 10. I'm going to encourage you to read this. They remind us that ultimately, and this is the truth, God is the source of all blessings, and we need to cultivate contentment. We talked about that before in the show. Look at Hebrews 13:5 and 1 Timothy 6:6. It helps us to guard against the allure of materialism and that endless pursuit of money. Now, I don't have time to discuss each of these verses today, but it's really important that you start to cultivate that contentment. And if you start off with prayer, if you start off with taking it to God, you're going to help get yourself there in a better way. It's all about that mindset. Furthermore, the principle of generosity, it's emphasized in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 7 and 8, and 1 Timothy 6:18. And I'm going to encourage you to read all of those verses. I'll put those in the show notes so you can go back and check them out. But all of these verses underscores the importance of giving back to God and supporting others regardless of one's financial state. See, I think that first tip is all about getting yourself in the right mindset. And it all starts with that prayer. And it all starts with acknowledging that, listen, it's not mine to begin with, and I've got to figure out how the Lord would want me to steward these resources. So that's tip number one. Tip number two. This one is absolutely crucial. Whenever I work with anybody, I always start here. So tip number two is know your financial flow, track your income and expenses diligently. So Craig, a fundamental step in managing finances, especially with an unpredictable income. And I almost feel like this is even more important when you have that unpredictable income, is to meticulously track all of your sources of income and every single expense. You know, I say it on the show all the time. What gets measured gets done. Gaining a clear picture of where your money's coming from and where it's going is essential for identifying those financial patterns and calculating averages, which are crucial for effective budgeting, especially when you have uneven income. See, without this detailed information, creating a realistic and workable budget becomes significantly more challenging. Now, there are various methods that can be employed for tracking financial flow, and it depends on your preferences and your technological comfort levels. And see, budgeting and saving apps offer some automated tracking and categorization of expenses, and those things can provide you with some real-time insights. Other people like spreadsheets that offer a customizable option for those who prefer a more hands-on approach to organizing their financial data. I've got many clients that they have those pivot tables, they have those spreadsheets, they keep track of everything. And when they come in to meet with me, whether it's be monthly or quarterly or at the end of the year, they've got this great spreadsheet because they're engaged in that. Now, you might be one of these people that just wants to make it simple, so you don't have to build this massive elaborate thing. So even with traditional paper and pen, you can be effective. Here's the key. The key is to choose a method that is sustainable, something you're going to use and will consistently make you record all of your financial transactions. An important aspect of tracking this is the ability to distinguish between needs and wants. And we really need to park here for just a second. Financial needs are those expenditures essential for living and working, such as your housing, your food, your utilities, and transportation. Those are things that are musts, and they're going to be at the top of your budget. So even in those lean months, you're still going to have to be able to sustain yourself for housing, for food, for utilities, and transportation. Now, wants, on the other hand, are those expenses that enhance comfort and leisure. Those are the things that we talked about with Fiona when she had those great months. She landed that new contract. Those are the times when you splurge a little bit, but they're not strictly necessary for survival. There also can be a gray area. Now, I'm talking about for a second. The gray area are those that are important, but not absolute needs. And you've got to understand this distinction. It's vital for making informed decisions about spending, especially during periods of lower income when prioritizing essential expenses becomes critical. If you've got those months where your income is a lot lower, you better be crystal clear on the things that are needs versus wants. And if you think about it, this is a Christian show. This aligns perfectly with the Christian principle of prioritizing contentment over excessive material consumption. So basically what I'm saying is you've got to learn to be content with your needs being met and not focus so much on those wants. So that's tip number 2. Let's move on to tip number 3, and that is chart your course. Choose a budgeting method that fits your flow. And that's really important, Craig. Several budgeting methods can be adapted to manage an unpredictable income. Each has its own set of advantages and consideration. Let's talk about a couple of those. There is budgeting based on the lowest income month, where that involves creating a budget using the minimum amount of income typically earned in a month. This is a very conservative approach, but it ensures that essential expenses are covered even during those lean times. It provides a strong safety net and reduces financial anxiety. And then what you do is any extra income received during those, quote, better months can then be confidently allocated to savings. We can allocate those to debt reduction or then put them into discretionary spending. That's what I did with Fiona, and she found it to be very effective. Another approach is budgeting using average monthly income. This method involves calculating the average income over a period, for example, 6 months or over a year, to create a more consistent baseline for planning. Now, this approach can smooth out income fluctuations, but here's the thing you need to understand. If you're going to use this average approach, it's going to require discipline to save during those higher income months to offset potential shortfalls in lower income months. Now, comparing the average income with the lowest earning month can provide a clearer understanding of the income range. We also can do what's called zero-based budgeting. That's a method where every dollar of income is assigned a specific purpose, whether it's for expenses, for savings, or debt repayment, resulting in a net zero balances. Now, for those with variable income, and that's really what we're talking about today, this often involves planning the budget based on the lowest expected monthly income and then allocating any extra income received to savings or to future expenses. And this method offers a high degree of control because it promotes intentional spending and saving habits. Another option is what's called the envelope system, where you allocate a certain amount of money to each envelope. That's basically your spending categories. That's something that my grandparents used to do, and it's something that you could use. Now, this, I don't know about how effective that would be when you have this variable income, but the general principle of setting spending limits for categories can be adapted to adjust to those amounts allocated to envelopes based on income received. Now, and there's paper versions of that. I mean, you literally go to the store and get some envelopes and write what they are, and there's digital versions of this. And this can be particularly effective for controlling discretionary spending. There's also something called percentage-based budgeting, and that involves allocating a fixed percentage of each income payment to different spending and savings categories. Now, this method is inherently flexible as the amounts in each category adjust automatically with income fluctuations, making it well-suited for unpredictable earnings. So, for example, what I'm talking about here is where you could apply, and I've talked about this on the show before, that 50-30-20 rule. 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings and debt repayment. And this is a common example of way people do this. And one of the reasons I like this for fluctuating income is it's real easy to take a look at this and say, okay, well, great. 50% of my income this month needs to go to needs. 30% needs to go to wants, and 20% needs to go to savings and debt repayment. The flaw in this, in my view, is what happens if your essential expenses are greater than that 50%. And then you got a problem. So I don't necessarily like this, but I wanted to share this as something that we could talk about here on the show today. There's also the profit first method, and that offers another percentage-based approach, particularly for business owners and freelancers. And it's primarily used in organizational finance, and it's a concept of priority-based budgeting can be adapted for personal use by those with variable income. And this involves ranking expenses based on their importance and their alignment with one's values, and then allocating funds accordingly. I think this is a great thing for Christian households to do, but this would mean prioritizing essential needs, giving, and savings. Now, we covered a lot of budgeting things there. My big takeaway on the budgeting section of this is find what works for you. I truly believe that it depends on your situation. If you've got a lot of fluctuation up and down every month, I think you may need to use an approach that really looks at that needs versus wants. Well, let's move on to tip number 4, and that's what I'm going to call prioritize with a purpose. One of the things you've got to do if you're in this type of situation where your income goes up and down, and I've mentioned this a couple times now, you got to focus on the essentials. You got to focus on giving, savings, and wise debt management. Craig, regardless of which budget method you choose, prioritizing expenses according to their importance is in alignment with your Christian faith, and it's in alignment with Christian values. Essential expenses such as housing, food, utilities, transportation, and healthcare, they've always got to be at the top of your priority list because you've got to ensure that these fundamental needs are met, because that's going to give you a sense of security, and it's going to help you reflect your biblical responsibility to care for yourself and for your family. Now, just I mentioned giving or tithing. That's a really core principle of Christian financial stewardship, and that's got to be prioritized within the budget as well, even with an unpredictable income. Now, many Christians, and I deal with people every day that say this to me, many Christians aim to give a percentage of their income because they believe demonstrates trust in God's provision, and it's all about supporting the work of the church and their ministries. And that act of giving is an expression of worship and obedience. So I think that we need to start there. So we're going to meet our absolute needs. Then we're going to talk about giving. And then we need to talk about savings, because savings is also of paramount importance, especially when your income is variable, because you may need to tap into that if you've got one of those low months. And that's why we talk about building that emergency fund, because that emergency fund is going to help cushion against these unexpected income dips or expenses, as well as saving for future financial goals. And see, savings provides financial security and aligns with biblical wisdom of preparing for the future. And finally, managing debt. So one of the things that you definitely have to focus in on is managing your debt, because that's going to help you break free from that bondage. Managing debt wisely and avoiding unnecessary debt is crucial for financial freedom. Here's the truth. High interest debt can be particularly burdensome and limit financial flexibility. So you've got to prioritize the repayment of those debts and avoid future unnecessary borrowing, because that can significantly improve your financial well-being, especially when income fluctuates. And I dare say that's one of the most important things. If you're carrying a big debt burden, you're going to have more what I'll call fixed costs. That's a fancy accounting term, but you're going to have more fixed costs that have to be met because, hey, it doesn't matter whether you got the income or not. You've got the debts. You've got to make these payments. So one of the things that I'm going to encourage you, Craig, and everyone else listening, is to have a debt repayment. It is far easier to manage fluctuating income if you're not trying to service a lot of debt. Well, let's move on to tip number 5, and that's one I'm going to call Build Your Ark. This is where you create an emergency fund for financial storms. And listen, if you're like me, you've been through financial storms. We all have those. So, Craig, for individuals with unpredictable income, an emergency fund is not just a good idea, it's a critical necessity. It acts as what we'll call the financial ark during times of income scarcity or unexpected expenses. Knowing that there are funds set aside to cover essential expenses during those income dips can significantly reduce stress and anxiety. So I'm going to encourage you. And listen, I know building an emergency fund can seem daunting, but it can be achieved if you make it consistent. I always talk about this all the time, is start the process and have some strategic savings. Setting aside even a small portion of every paycheck, or if you're in the gig economy, every income piece that you earn, regardless of the amount, will help you accumulate this over time. And then during months with higher than average earnings, you can allocate a larger portion of that to that emergency fund, and that can truly accelerate its growth. One of the things that I recommend on the show all the time is automating those savings transfers, because that can help you ensure consistency. I have many clients that just automatically, whenever they get paid, a certain amount goes to tithing, a certain amount goes to savings, a certain amount goes to debt reduction. All those things are important. But see, starting small and gradually increasing the amount saved is often more sustainable. A lot of people can't just start off with, hey, Ralph, you said I need 3 to 6 months. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But consider just growing it slowly. Maybe you want to consider selling unused items or allocating unexpected income. Like maybe you get a tax refund. It's that type of time of the year with tax season. Maybe you get that refund and you use that to start seeding that emergency fund. And that way you can start to build that. Now, your overall goal for an emergency fund, and a lot of people get scared when I say this, is 3 to 6 months worth of essential living expenses. And listen, if you work in the gig economy or if you have fluctuating income, I'm going to say something very bold. I think that your main focus needs to be to build that emergency fund. I would even dare say, even before you worry about so much about doing that, saving, putting a money aside for retirement or extinguishing that debt, you've got to have that emergency fund because it's going to help you smooth out those type of things. This is what I'm going to talk about, tip number 6 here in a second. And it's going to take time to achieve it. But even a small emergency fund can provide a crucial buffer against those unexpected financial challenges. So let's move on to tip number 6. And that's exactly what I was talking about, those things that happen. We're going to say prepare for the seasons. Craig, you've got to prepare for irregular income and expenses. See, here's the thing. Predictable fluctuations in income and expenses are often a reality. Hey, listen, they're a reality for everybody, but they are definitely a reality for those with variable income because you might not land that client. You might not book those gigs this month. And if you can anticipate these seasons, it is going to be key to effective budgeting. For instance, let's say you're an individual that works seasonal. You may have predictable periods of higher income, and then you'll have those lower income times. A lot of my clients that work in outdoor, like landscaping or lawn maintenance, they have those situations. They are very seasonal. And then similarly, expenses like the holidays. So it's both an income side and an expense side. So expenses like the holidays, back to school costs, and annual bills occur regularly. Another thing you can consider doing is setting up what's called a sinking fund, or that's what we call a dedicated savings account. I've talked about these on the show a few times where you can anticipate those larger expenses and help manage them more effectively. And if you allocate a small amount each month, a lot of people that I've worked with, I remember back in my credit union days, they had the Christmas fund, and every month they would put a certain amount aside because they knew come October or November, they needed that money to do the Christmas stuff. And see, by allocating a small amount each month towards these future expenses, the financial burdens is spread out over time, and that makes it more manageable when they arise. So for example, setting aside a monthly amount for the holiday gifts like I talked about, or maybe you've got an annual car insurance premium. This can help you prevent that significant financial strain when these expenses are due. I have a lot of clients, a lot of my retired clients actually do what I'll call the sinking fund. They basically create an accounting system for themselves, and it doesn't have to be elaborate, but they say, every month I'm going to put aside this month or this much for my insurance because that's going to come due in October. A lot of people, like in Delaware, for example, our property taxes are due in September, 1st of October. So what a lot of people will do is they'll start to put that money aside. It's kind of the same idea if you've got a mortgage with an escrow. That's exactly what an escrow is. The mortgage company is putting that income aside or that expense aside every month so that when it comes to time to pay it, you got the money to do it. And see, given the unpredictable nature of income, it's essential to review and adjust the budget each month based on the actual income received and any upcoming known expenses. That's one of the things about this seasonality. It's unpredictable. So you've got to be willing to review and adjust your budget each month based on what's really going on. And see, there's a lot of people get stuck on that. They think they're going to create this budget, and this budget is going to be, 2 stone tablets. They're going to have the hammer and chisel. But that's not what a budget's supposed to be. A budget should be a dynamic tool that adapts to your changing financial circumstances. And if you review it, it allows you to make those necessary adjustments to your spending and savings plans. Let's move on to tip number 7, and that's embrace contentment and seek community. Finding peace and support in God's provision. Craig, cultivating contentment is a vital aspect of Christian financial stewardship, especially when you're dealing with income variability. There's this temptation to compare yourself to others or to constantly strive for more and more and more. And that can lead to dissatisfaction and it can lead to overspending. I talk about this on the show all the time. Focusing on gratitude for what God has provided and trusting in His plan can bring a sense of peace that transcends these financial circumstances. One of the ways you can do that is seek support and accountability from trusted Christian friends. Maybe you have family members or some financial mentors that can provide you valuable encouragement and practical advice because it's not easy. Listen to me on this. it's not easy to budget when your income fluctuates. So sharing financial challenges and goals within a supportive community can make the journey less isolating, and it can offer different perspectives. There may be someone else who has been through that same situation that you're in, Craig. They understand what you're going through. Utilizing available Christian resources such as books, websites, podcasts just like this one. They can provide ongoing learning and guidance tailored to a faith-based perspective. And if you're listening to me, I imagine that that's important to you. And these resources can offer insights and principles that align with Christian values and help you navigate your finances in a way that honors God. Well, now let's get to our reflection questions. We have covered a great deal today, and I just want to park here for a minute and let's reflect on what we've talked about. So let's start off with number one. How can seeking God's wisdom and guidance help you in managing your finances, especially with an unpredictable income? Think about it a little bit. What are the things that we talked about today? What are the things that you didn't even think about? Are you going to start with prayer? Are you really going to focus on tracking expenses? Are you going to work on that budget? Are you going to find Christian mentors? Are you going to build that community? What are those things that you're going to start with today to help you manage your finances? Second step, what steps can you take to track your income and expenses diligently? And why is this important for effective budgeting? Think about that. What are the steps that you can take today? Not tomorrow, not next week. What can you today? If you're listening to this, the title caught your eye, you're thinking about, yeah, you know what, Ralph, this appeals to me. This applies to me. Maybe you heard Craig's listener question. You're like, man, Craig, it's like you're talking directly to me. Well, what steps can you take to track your income diligently that will help you get to that effective budget to reduce that stress, to reduce that anxiety? And then think about which budgeting method do you think would work best for you? Depends on your situation. Look at your income variability and then discuss or think about why that one would work for you. So those are my reflection questions. If you found today's episode helpful, or if anyone else is listening and you found it helpful, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. You can do this by going to askralphpodcast.com/newsletter. Listen, our newsletter is packed with valuable information. It's packed with tips and resources to help you on your financial journey. And by subscribing, you'll stay informed and empowered to make the best financial decisions. And that's what it's all about. You can get to that by going to askralphpodcast.com/newsletter. Again, I'll put that in the show notes, but it's askralphpodcast.com/newsletter. Now, tomorrow we're going to be discussing an important topic, and that's 5 important things that disappear when you retire. Are you ready? And it's not your waistline, and hopefully it's not all your money. So make sure to join me again tomorrow for another insightful episode about 5 important things that disappear when you retire, and are you ready to do them? It is going to be a game changer. Well, thank you, Craig, for your questions and for your time today. Remember, my passion is to help you achieve financial success. I want to see you live out your dreams, and I want to see you grow in your faith. And I know together we can master your finances from a Christian perspective. So as I always end the show, stay financially savvy out there, and God bless you abundantly.
Thank you for joining us on the Ask Ralph Show. And with a simple click to subscribe, we'll invite you back to our next episode. And remember, financial issues don't have to be complicated. Just ask Ralph. The information contained in this episode of Ask Ralph is based on data available as of the date of its release. Saggio Accounting Plus and Ask Ralph Media, Inc. is under no obligation to update this content if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances, and any information provided is not to be considered as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney before acting on any material covered.